it is a little hard when people doze off in the middle of the pitch. Right. So
Oh my God. Are you serious?
yeah, it has happened. It has
Oh.
happened more than once, but it has happened.
Someone slept
Someone slept.
in
Yeah.
the.
And it's
Oh
very hard to
man.
keep and it's very and I still don't know what is the right way to wake up a person you're pitching to. Can you just say, hey, can you get up? I still have the, or should you just continue with a higher pitch so that you indirectly wake them up? I don't know the answer to that question. It's happened. So this one time this.
Hey Srinath, thanks a lot for agreeing to do this. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Yep, thanks for having me here, Aviral and Mazin.
When did you first see a rocket launch in space?
I think it was somewhere in the early 90s on Doordarshan. That is was for some PSLV launch, if I'm not mistaken. That was the first rocket launch I saw, and it was not as fancy as what we see today in terms of video coverage, but it left its mark on me for sure. I think yeah, early 90s on DD.
And did you want to become an astronaut after that, like most young folks?
Totally, yeah, totally. Yes. And actually I that passion continued for a really long time.
Okay.
In fact, even as late as even 10 years ago, I did a
Hmm.
lot of intense physical training that
Oh, really?
was all in my head building up towards gearing up for, okay, probably someday I could use all of this to say I'm fit enough to be an astronaut. So yeah, that never has let that has always been there, never been able to let that slide.
Amazing. I guess you are closer to the dream than most of us. So you did get there in some way, not as an astronaut, but
Yeah.
amazing. And so you're growing up, and I think like most Indian kids, you end up going to engineering. But then after that, your life takes a lot of different paths. I wouldn't say they're detours, but you've done film school, and you've even trained as a pilot, which is not really things you find both as a young Indian engineer as well as a founder. So would love to talk through that early journey, and what you did just before starting Agnikul.
Sure. So I'll take a little step back to my childhood, which is where I think the seeds for Agnikul were actually sown. But of course, I didn't know that
Right.
until very recently. I grew up in a family
Right.
of people where everyone was into physics. My mom was a physics teacher, aunt is a physics teacher, and my granddad was a physics graduate, was working in Doordarshan, by the way. So I think somehow that the thing was there for physics, and and I think for one of my um, something in fourth standard or fifth standard, I got a prize for some science quiz, and it was called Astronomy Quiz Book. I still remember. I have it actually with me. I think that was really the turning point of my so-called career, I would say. But that was fourth standard. So anyway, so that started, and I was very clear that I wanted to do something or the other in aerospace. But when it was time to do engineering as a degree, I was strongly discouraged about anything in aerospace because that's people were very clear that I will not get a job, right? And I didn't know enough to even debate that. I was like, okay, fine, what was the next favorite engineering? And that was
Right.
electrical. That's how I went into
Okay.
electrical.
Okay.
But electrical also, I was playing with all these hobby kits and all that. That's, as I said, right, a lot of physics people around, so it was just like, it was very natural for me to get into something in electronics and stuff. This is what I was playing with. This is how I spend my free time, coding and electronic hobby kits. That's how I spent my free time before I went into engineering. After that, I wanted to get a job in the core fields, and that is why I went into ABB, which is an electrical engineering firm. But I was extremely disillusioned once I went inside, because the job was very much about like commissioning, servicing, and I was in my mind thinking I'll be designing or whatever. I had all these notions of what it means to be doing engineering, but it was not that. And I also had this FOMO that everyone around me at that time, particularly, you hang out in groups when you're in college, right? And everyone in my group for friends was doing something other than finance. And I felt like I'm doing some real mistake by sticking with engineering. But I still couldn't let go of engineering. And I came across this course called financial engineering. I was like, wow, this is it. At least on the name, it blends perfectly well. Right? So,
2008, I guess.
Yes. So, and interestingly, so that is
deal.
when I finally decided I'll do a master's in financial engineering. So I applied, got an admit in in Columbia University, went to New York for this, and again, this is the first time I'm going outside the country, and my image of New York was what I saw in the Wall Street movie and all that. So that is what I'm thinking, and I'm going there. And little did I know what was waiting in 2008. I started in June 2008. I think by September, one big investment bank was gone. Okay, this is what we're supposed to.
Wow, it's a financial engineer on Wall Street. Amazing.
Right. So anyway, that was very interesting though, because it was very, I would say, there was very gray color of New York that I saw. Right.
Yeah.
But it also taught me, what is the meaning of, financial value for an asset? What does it mean to say something is up, something is down, and all that stuff? And only two kinds of firms were actually hiring at that time. One was a group of insurance companies that were trying to protect the existing, large pool of cash that they were holding on to in some form or the other. And the other was law firms who actually were trying to come up with with complicated ways to value bankrupt, companies. So these are the only two places that were actually hiring. So got into AXA, the insurance company there. I think 1 year into my job, it was very clear that I had to go back to engineering. Actually, that is how I actually realized I should go there. But I was also constantly questioning myself. There was a lot of self-doubt because I'd already gone from electrical engineering to finance, and now I want to go back to engineering. And everyone was like, you're never going to be serious about anything. The moment something gets hard, you'll want to do something else. I heard all of that feedback by then. So which is when I thought, okay, let me actually try something completely different. And that was where the whole filmmaking aspect came in. Filmmaking was something that I always had an eye on, like in the sense I never tried it, but I was very curious about what happens behind the camera. It is just something that I used to listen to interviews and all that.
That was your answer to people telling you that you have no direction. You decided to do filmmaking.
Yeah. No, because I really wanted to question who I am, right? There was a bit of, so when there's self-doubt, you need to really figure out, hey, what is this? Am I just going from one point to other without knowing anything? And that was, I think, one of the best 4 years of my time in US. I used to work in the daytime, and evening film school I attended for 4 years. And I did usual film school. I think you may know this if you've spoken to people who have taken courses. You do each part of that, right? Direction, camera, and everything, starting from holding the mic boom to wiping the lenses to actually directing. I tried everything, and I actually found a deep connect with screenwriting, because it somehow felt like that was the starting point of all films in some sense. At least that's what I felt at that time. So I used to, so in the last 1 or 2 years, you can choose more of what you want to do, and I always used to choose screenwriting. And I met a lot of very, very, very different people from what I had met in my first 25 years of my life in those 4 years, right? So that, I think, actually opened up a lot of, just reality checks in me. I just realized, okay, all these people are also there, and they are not in the usual mode of thinking that I am in. Just got a reality check. Yeah. And so the final moment of truth for me came when my I think it was the last paper or last assignment of screenwriting, and the topic was write 100 words about why you want to be a screenwriter, right? And I actually never really finished that. But that got me to really thinking what I should do for a profession.
You didn't write the note on being a writer. It's a bit ironical as well.
Yes. But that was the question that actually got me into a lot of thinking. It was just a 100-word thing that was asked. I mean, I finally ended up writing something, right? But it was not a very honest answer. So I
Right.
just
And
did
this
it
is
because
what time frame, Srinath? Like,
2014,
2000.
15,
Okay. So
2014,
4, 5
15.
years after, 5, 6 years actually after the financial engineering thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, all this while I was working on Wall Street, I was like, doing whatever I could do in AXA. That was there. That was nice. That was the good thing about being in a, in a team that was very closely linked to the markets is that your core of your job is from, morning 7 to evening 4 or 5. Right. After
Right.
that, nothing much happens. And actually by 5 p.m. New York time, Japan opens only at 6:30, 6:45. So after that, people it's not a very intense point at the intense, busy schedule at that point. So after
Right.
5, my day was actually quite open. So this is when all this random searching was going on. So I decided I had to do something in aerospace. I was very clear about that part. So, and I also
So
was
how did
because I was, yeah,
you just went
sorry.
back to that childhood passion? Like what convinced you that this is, because how did you
Because it
go
was
from acting
always
to
there, like it never really went away, right? And I realized that I
right,
should just give it an honest shot because this hunger was constantly there. And just like all these lot of soul searching related questions basically made me think I have a lot of degrees. Something or other will help me some way. If I don't go anywhere, I can get some job somewhere. That confidence was always there, right? So I was like, let me give this a shot for 10, 15 years. I'll try to build rockets. Someone will accept some rocket somewhere. That was really the mode I started in. It was not a very well thought out plan or anything. It was an
Worst case,
honor.
you would have made a movie on rockets. Because
Yeah, that's possible. That is one option too. So yeah, that's how it started. In fact, in between, and this astronaut thing was also there, right? So it was very gray in the beginning. It was not a aerospace, a rocket making, and all that stuff. It was not so clear. Something in aerospace. So
Got
in
it.
fact, even difference between aeronautical and aerospace, I was not very clear. So that's why in one direction I started going for pilot training for the single engine planes. And on the other side, I was doing a lot of hiking, particularly high altitude hiking, because somewhere I read that you'll have to be really fit to be an astronaut. And all this I was doing around 2013 to 2015, that kind of a time frame. Can you imagine? So all this was happening on the side. But I also realized, by that time SpaceX there was a lot of noise around SpaceX in the US. They were very close to attempting that reusability, like catching the part of the rocket that falls back. They had not done it until 2015 December. So I realized I should go to LA. Not much was happening. At least I couldn't find the right kind of networks in New York. So I moved to Los Angeles. Just for this reason, I got a job in very similar company, AIG, very similar to AXA. And
so you just moved to
that
another
was even
insurance
better.
company, but in LA, so that you were closer to where this was happening. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, exactly right. And the interesting part was they were working New York hours there. So my days used to start even earlier, 5 a.m. in the morning. But after 2:30, there was nothing to do. Basically, markets were completely done with. So that was my intense phase of networking. And I actually am not a very like a very comfortable networker. I'm usually a little shy. I always wonder what people will think if I go and strike up a random conversation, but I was trying my best to push myself out of my comfort zone and somehow just meet as many people as possible in the industry just to understand what happens. So I showed up at every meetup that had the word space in it in the LA area, right?
And you're doing your pilot license on the side.
Easy.
No, pilot license I got when I was in New York itself.
Right.
That was over. That was a
Okay.
1-year thing between 2014 to 15.
But you're training to be an astronaut still.
It's not. It was not like that. It was just like in the side something, because I heard that all astronauts have some piloting background, right? So it was like I should start that also. It was, as you can imagine, it was not a very clean face in terms of what I wanted to do. I was just like somehow preparing in my head. That is what I was telling myself at least. And like in screenwriting, they say there is something called the story you tell yourself and then the story you tell outside. So this is the story I was telling myself to do all this. But when I was in LA, I actually realized that one problem as such in the market, right? There were a lot of people who were stuck with small satellites not being launched. Everywhere I visited, and I visited all the universities in that area, pretty much all the universities in that area. Like, UCLA, what is it? The other one, University of California. all of those people had small satellites, but they were not in space, they were in labs. And the answer was always about, rockets not being available. And I just felt it is a little weird that, in these times, that is still the case, that rockets are not that easy to get for satellites to go to space. So this is where the whole thing started. So I thought, okay, we'll build a small rocket and try to do something. Or in the side, I applied for Blue Origin, SpaceX, all the other companies in that area. And I didn't get through even the first round. And probably because of visa related issues, that's the story I tell myself. I don't know if my resume was good enough. I also enrolled for a second master's program in aerospace engineering. So this also happened on the side.
How many degrees do you have by then, Srinath? I have lost count. 6, 7, 10.
No, just 2.5.
Okay. No. So you have your bachelor's, you have your master's in financial engineering, then you have the filmmaking one as well.
That was a side one, yeah. That's
side one, but still, I mean, you could say so. And then you have a pilot license, which I don't know if you should count as a degree, but it's clearly
it's a license.
It's a license, but you have like 4 plus at least in my head.
If you count all of that, if you count all of that, it will come. Yeah, the licenses there are a few. As I told you, I was training to do a lot of things. So I have I have an advanced scuba diving degree, like a lot of random things I was doing.
Sorry, what other license do you have?
I'm an advanced scuba diver. Like, there are like 3 levels of licenses in scuba diving. So I have a specialization in night scuba diving and all that, which is generally a little rare. Again, it was all about what do you need to do to become an astronaut?
Wow.
All of those things added up. So finally, and because I was not getting any real interviews as well, I thought really we should try our own company. And of course, SpaceX was there building much, much larger rockets, being so successful already at that time. So it didn't look like a crazy thing to try. Or to be honest, if you're doing all that networking in that space, it didn't look weird at all. Even though when I was telling back people people in India back at home, people were actually mostly not even taking it seriously. It was that foreign a concept. But when in my community that I was talking to, it was like, you should just go build a rocket. Kind of a vibe was there. So, but my citizenship was definitely an issue, right? So I realized India is actually the better place to do it. Otherwise, I'll be figuring out I'll take a lot of time figuring out the paperwork part of it. So that I didn't want to get into. So started searching.
I'm just curious about why
because you're not a citizen, right?
Yeah, you just don't get access to the right opportunity.
Oh, because it's always a dual use angle to that technology, right? So they don't allow it if you're not a citizen, or you don't get the right kind of, or at least the more interesting jobs are there only for citizens.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep.
Makes sense.
So that's sort of how that plays out.
New York to LA, and now.
No. Then what happened is in between I also, obviously I was telling my friends and all that, and one of my friends by then he was in Australia and he had moved back to Chennai. His name is Moin. So he and I, we were just randomly talking about this stuff, and we used to cold call various IIT professors across different IITs. Because I knew that we needed some sort of a lab or something. Like it's just not. I didn't have that kind of money to say, okay, we'll go and build a large company, put $50 million in it and start. That I didn't have that kind of money. So at least for the infrastructure part, we wanted an academia partner for sure. So cold called about 70, 80 professors in every IIT with a meaningful aero department, right? Like Kanpur, Kharagpur, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai. Everywhere I just like randomly tried connecting with profs. And I think I was connecting with very busy professors or whatever was the reason, or I was not doing it right, I don't know. But people were not too interested, got a lot of life advice on trying to be focused or having to be focused and all that. But
that seems to be a common theme.
That seems to be, by the way, a recurring theme. At that time, it was a recurring theme already.
I didn't know you get life advice as a response to cold emails, but cool. That's awesome to know.
I got a couple of people gave me meetings, and then I went in for these meetings.
Okay, got it.
And then they'll ask me about my background, and that'll be very, very confusing
Yeah,
background, I
I'm a
could say.
scuba diver. I can fly planes. I
Hey,
can
I
make
don't, I
films.
don't say those things outside unless people ask me about it specifically. Okay. For me, it's more like
Uh,
financial engineering, aerospace engineering, rockets. That's the usual story.
yeah,
Film
fair.
school,
Yeah.
pilot, scuba diving, all that is for other conversations. So anyway,
Yeah.
one prof out of IIT Madras actually showed some interest, right? And he actually happened to head a very large combustion R&D center within IIT Madras. It was called the National Center for Combustion Research and Development. Fascinating place, because actually anything that burns, forget rocket engine fuel, but anything like municipal waste to rubber to how normal household things burn in case there is a fire accident, everything is studied there. So having access to that prof and him showing some interest was really the biggest turning point in, I think, our story. So the moment I had his attention, I immediately quit this job and moved back to India. And Moin, my other co-founder as well, he was actually doing he was a part of a family business with his cousins in contract manufacturing of cosmetic bottles. He also gave that up to his cousins, and he also joined me full time. And so we basically formally started Agnikul in 2017 December. So that's the very long version of the story, but yeah. So that's how Agnikul started basically.
No, but amazing, and all those pieces kind of fit together, and you kind of see how the dots start to connect. It's incredible. So tell us, what happened next. You guys, went to IIT Madras, and then how did the next couple of years go? Would love to hear more about the journey.
Yeah, I think so. Because IIT was there, it was easy to get the basic work started. A lot of students were there who were doing masters, PhDs, who had some background in rocket engine development. Prof himself was a rocket scientist. Moin and I are not,
Right.
by the way. I'll be very clear. Even today, we are not. But I just love rocket. I just read up a lot about it, and I technically have a half-finished master's degree with a specialization in rocket propulsion,
Yeah.
so I can at least understand the jargon. But yeah, so that's my background, right? So it was about getting to like some rocket design. You need to have some rocket to build, and this is where I
Right.
would like to bring up one of our retired ISRO scientists. His name is R.V. Perumal. He actually happened to be in Chennai, and he's the father of India's GSLV rocket. GSL, the biggest rocket of India,
Oh,
right? And yeah,
right.
he was very lucky that he also happened to see something in what we were saying, and it was very scary pitching to him. Actually, for me, the first time I was actually pitching to a rocket scientist about making a new rocket. That's not that, at least I was not very comfortable doing that.
while not being a rocket scientist, and
Exactly.
Srinath, after you complete, I'd love to, if you could share reactions of people when you would pitch them what you were pitching, just after you complete this. I would love to know that.
Yeah,
Definitely
yeah, I've had very.
did.
It spans the entire spectrum of what all you can expect in reactions. So, but yeah, sure, I'll talk about that. But anyway, so yeah, so with Perumal sir on board, I think a lot of things became clear in terms of milestones, right? What to do, what kind of team do you need, how many people are you going to need, and how to deconstruct this journey into like a milestone based story. And that was actually needed to raise money, because the next immediate thing was to raise funds, obviously, right? I put in like about 50 lakhs or something of whatever we had saved, me and mine. But that was just keeping us alive. That's it. Nothing much could be done with that kind of money. So then we went into fundraising, and I was completely new to me. But that's where all my storytelling learning hopefully helped a little bit. I get some positive feedback when I pitch, whether I'm able to raise money or not. At least people say that I did a good pitch. So I think that comes from my film school years, because they spend a lot of time. Because see there, right? Just taking a side step to that, you're actually taught how to go to a producer and tell a story in 1 minute, and then in 5 minutes, and then in 1 hour, right? So that
Wow.
was like, how do you condense it? That's the first time someone actually told me about, like, because when you prepare for interviews in college, you always hear about this elevator pitch and all that, the 10-second
Yes.
version of who
Right.
you are if you meet someone
Right.
very senior or something like that.
And those same 5 questions, that tell me about your strengths, tell me about your weaknesses, and some weird question. which everyone asks. I know. Yeah.
So that is there, but no one has actually tried to, like, this is the first time only in film school I heard it. Like, can you tell us the same story, right? Basically, you end up writing like a full length screenplay. It's about 90 pages, so 90 minutes or so. How do you tell that in 1 minute, 5 minutes, and 1 hour? That is actually an exercise we do. In just verbally telling it out. So I think somehow somewhere something from that got cross-pollinated to pitching. I think I don't know, but that helped. But it was a very hard thing to sell a space tech business in India. This was 2017, because that time people were not even sure that business models existed out of space tech.
Right.
So my pitching experience was
when you make money and how. And,
yeah. No, more like first there is a sector. And then there is like within the sector, there is.
Yeah, sorry, Srinath. I don't even think people were thinking business. They were like, what is this guy smoking? Probably.
Yeah.
I think the business question is probably second.
Possible.
Yeah.
So there was this 3-step process, right? You go and explain that there is a sector like this, and this is how you make money there. Then within that, you say, there are rockets, there are satellites, there are ground stations. I am in the rocket side. And then within that, you tell, okay, Agnikul is doing these things differently. So it's a 3-step process to get to even Agnikul. Right? If you start off by saying you're building rockets, it's completely like at that moment, probably we have lost our audience, right? So you need to go give context and go back and say what is going on. So,
Mazin, we're getting a master class in storytelling as well, along with rockets.
Exactly.
How do you pitch a rocket company first?
Maybe
Start with what are rockets?
The 1 minute pitch. I would love to hear what's the 1 minute. I'm sure it's refined quite a bit.
The 1 minute story, I've never fully got. I think it still takes me 2-3 minutes. I'm just saying that 1 minute was helpful to compress it and tell. But and I also constantly I'm like thinking like, okay, even now if I'm talking to you both, right? I think I have, like, again, this came from the training only, that they always say like, are they with you? If not, try to do something to make them come back to you. Like, constantly craving attention in some sense when you're pitching, but because otherwise people get lost and it's already rockets and it's like what is going on. So anyway, it took me a while to figure out all this. I mean, now I can say after 4-5 rounds of fundraise and all that, now I can say this, but in that time it was a little hard, and a lot of no's as well. But it was somehow easy for me to handle the no's, because even in the cold calling phase, a lot of people said no. Right by then, so I'd gotten used to the fact that this is not going to be an easy journey. Right. So when people were telling no at various phases, in the 3 sets of meetings, right? Sometimes the no comes in the first phase itself, or sometimes it happens in the last, after the 5th or 6th meeting it comes. But I was getting used to it. Somehow it was not impacting me. I don't know why, because I think I always knew that somehow, somewhere, something will click. Some hope was there always. So that's how we finally ended up with meeting Special Invest, a fund out of Chennai and Bangalore. And interestingly, one of the partners there, Vishesh is his name, actually happened to have a view on rockets, or at least space tech as a business. So with him, it was more about second and third, not like space sector itself. And because the combustion center was there, we had also made some engine prototypes. I mean, nothing like the actual engines that we'll be flying, but some resemblance of some engine, like a hobby engine, you could say, a hobby rocket engine. So with that, we were able to convince him that, we know how to make hardware, and we had retired ISRO people as well. So that is how the first fundraise happened. It was a $500,000 fundraise. And from there, slowly, then officially we became a VC backed company.
So before you go ahead, Srinath, first, like, I'm just coming back to my question. What was the spectrum of reaction, and what was, like, I think the most memorable but negative one? I'm sure the memorable positive ones turned out to be investments. And then what were you pitching to them? What do you actually do then, and has it changed from then to today? So it's like 2 questions.
Okay, the most memorable negative one, it is a little hard when people doze off in the middle of the pitch. Right? So,
oh my God. Are you serious?
Yeah, it has happened. It has
Oh,
happened more than once, but it has happened.
Someone slept
Someone slept.
in the.
And it's
Oh
very hard to
man.
keep and it's very and I still don't know what is the right way to wake up a person you're pitching to. Can you just say, hey, can you get up? I still have the or should you just continue with a higher pitch so that you
someone
indirectly wake
slept.
them up? I don't know the answer to that question. It's happened. So this one time me, Moin and Prof, all three were there, and at those times I used to get all of us because I thought each of us could add different values to because already it's a difficult story to sell. So I wanted to get as much juice out of whatever 1 hour I get with a VC or an investor. So we used to go as this trio, right? Me, Prof, and Moin. We three used to go and pitch. And this is this moment where the person started to sleep, and I was really getting a lot of. I was finding it hard to control my laughter. I didn't know what to do. And I think at that time, the thing I did was to raise my voice to very high, like as if I was yelling at someone. I just started telling my story in a much higher, volume. And it somehow went, but I still remember that. Out of all my pitches, I definitely remember that one. I think the other good pitches were also where, bad pitches. Yeah, I think the other bad pitches actually would be like, I wouldn't say bad, but more like frustrating ones are where people end up giving you advice. But I remember one of them actually telling me, Srinath, I think he was 32 years old at that time. So, Srinath, you're 32, 33, you need to go and do other things in life. This is not going to work out in India. that pitch, that is a very standard feedback I used to get. That was like a norm. So that used to frustrate me. I'm like, I came from there. I kind of know this story. So that is one thing. And the other parts, I think that's what, at least quickly, this is what I remember in the negative ones. Positive ones were good. Of course, the ones that converted into an actual investment were great. But the ones that didn't convert but got us like a proper, networking connection or someone who actually just empathized properly with the real story that I'm telling, those were good ones. I still remember them. I'm still in touch with those people. But that has also happened. People are not able to invest, but there was a connect that happened in those pitches. So yeah, that's some stuff to share there.
And maybe to turn that into advice for listeners, what is maybe some tips for founders who are pitching for their first check?
So it really depends upon getting the attention of the person and telling the idea in the most interesting way, right? The other people on the other side are hearing this thousands of stories. So to actually leave an impact, you need to say or do something that is actually they remember it at least one day later. I think that is the most important thing that I try to tell, even though it's a rocket building story. How many analogies can you use, or how like I think Einstein or someone said this is what people say, right? Like, can you tell this to a 10-year-old or something like that, right?
Yes.
And that simplification, more than dumbing it down, actually gets you to the core value add from what you're trying to do. Because there should not be, if it's a business idea, it should not be that complex actually, right? So that part I've tried to do a lot. And for us, what worked a lot is this comparison with ground transportation. So, and comparison with selling laptops and comparison with whatnot, right? Basically, because we say we build modular rockets, that sounds very fancy. But then one thing that people usually connect with strongly is now if you connect a modular rocket with, say, how people end up building laptops, right? Wherein you have a same architecture or a same series of laptops, but you can put more RAM or more hard disk or more processor in this or power in the same overall architecture. We bring a similar concept to rocket building. Somehow that seems to connect a little more than saying modular rockets where we have one engine less or one engine more or something. So stuff like that, analogies and stories and connects with ground transportation, because rocket business is a transportation business. Those things have gotten slightly better at that over the last 4-5 years. But yeah, that has helped.
And what was your pitch, Srinath, to the earliest investors?
The earliest investors, the pitch was we are building something that can make space transportation as easy as ground transportation. So that's how I usually start, and then say, okay, but in ground transportation, you have autos, cabs, buses, trains. Today, all the rockets that go to space are comparable to trains. No one is building cabs, and we are here to build cabs. So that's how usually I
Wow.
start, and then it goes
Love
into
that.
all the gory details of what it means to build a cab to space.
But that's such a good analogy. I think it really helps to put into perspective with something that people can relate to, right? That's the most important thing in
Yeah.
telling a story. And so yeah, now let's maybe talk about the next phase of your journey. So you got your first check. Uh, would like to understand how your role changed as well. Was fundraising kind of something that you were doing continuously? How much time did you get to spend actually building a rocket versus connecting with investors and doing that whole thing?
Yeah, I think that's even today, even after 5 years, that is always a challenge for me. I'm just, because I came in more for my passion for rockets, probably take everything else on that I have to do on the way as a burden, including fundraising, right? But I also
Right.
have learned over the last 3-4 years, particularly the last 2 years, to let go of that and focus a lot more on actually building the company. I think Prof actually summarizes it. Like, he gave me a piece of advice that I still, take very seriously. Right? Remember, Srinath, that you have to build a rocket company, not a rocket. Right? So that I've taken to heart.
It's a good one.
So that actually connected very strongly with me. So nowadays I do a little more of that, but in the early years it was almost like anything that is not engineering is pure burden. That's how I started. It's like, okay, I have to go sell the story, fine, I'll do it because we need money. But now I've changed, I think, or at least I'm trying to change. The last 2-3 years I've actually consciously let go of a lot of that. Also, the other thing that has helped is we've gotten a lot more retired ISRO scientists to help us. The early years it was about 4 or 5 people, then it was about 12 people. Now we have 30 plus people, right? And some of these people are actually full time. So, and they have been there, done that. And so for me, it is more about, okay, at a system level, whatever it's almost like on a bad day, I go there to listen and then I go back to whatever I have to do as a, founder and CEO. So that I think that way my role has, or what I focus on in my role, has also changed over the last couple of years. But it is still a very it's a journey with a lot of hats I have had to play. Like most founders, I think nothing special about
Yeah.
building rockets. As you grow, every fundraise, I think I feel like, I've done a seed, pre-series A, series A, and series B, and it's like, seed is the first fundraise, but pre-series A is the first pre-series A, and series A is the first series A. Because every time,
Yeah,
I think, I'm sure
absolutely.
you also would know, right? Investors look for different things, obviously. So the series A pitch is not the same as the seed pitch. So that way, I've always felt like every fundraise is a first-time fundraise. So that
It
happens.
reminds me of one of the things that one of our founders has said. It's like leveling up in a video game. Each fundraise is like a new level, and then you have new things you have to
Correct.
unlock. And uh,
Yes, exactly right.
but on that note,
Exactly
I'm
right. Yeah.
curious. You spoke about scaling your team and getting a bunch of rocket scientists to join your team. You went from 4 to like 30. How did you, as a non-rocket scientist, go about recruiting rocket scientists? How do you know if someone's a good rocket scientist or not?
So I think with the retired ISRO people, these are people who are super accomplished. They're literally well known in the industry itself, right? So there, the connections happen through Prof or through Perumal sir, who we started, who
People
was
who
supporting
are
us
in
from
the
the very
industry,
beginning.
and yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think with the other younger people, it's more interesting. That hiring is interesting because a lot of people, with the space industry at least, there is a lot of passion generally going on, right? People who are passionate about space
Yeah,
are actually generally very, very, uh, they are
a lot
driven
of
by
people like
that
you,
a
when
lot.
you were younger, who just have a vision and have no
Yes,
experience, right? How do you?
who just want to work on space tech, right? So that we have
Yeah,
tried to actively hire for at that attitude more than the talent aspects of certain skills, because I feel anyway real rocket science is not taught in any college anywhere, not only India. I mean, even in the US or any whatever, from whatever I've learned and experienced, I don't see that happening in any academic institution. Because
What
it's a
is real rocket science, Srinath? If you can, I know it's very hard to condense that in 3 minutes, but you're a great storyteller, like you've learned. So, what's rocket science like we think, and what's real rocket science? If you can just give an example.
So, see, so rocket science, like basically myths about rocket science compared to reality is there is a lot of trade-off making that has to happen, right? You need to be an
Hmm.
extremely good decision maker, or you need to have a team of people who are extremely good decision makers. I think that somehow is not easily taught in academic institutions, right?
Interesting.
So because everything is a trade-off, and
Can you give an
basically,
example?
yeah, so say for example, you're building a particular rocket engine, right? You can build multiple versions of it, or multiple multiple shades of it, or whatever it is the design way. But what will actually stop you from doing the perfect engine is, say, things like mass and cost, and how it will affect the other systems. A person will say, hey, this rocket engine is fine, but you can't put any tank, or a cheap tank, or a inexpensive tank above this rocket engine, because you're building the engine in this way. So there's always a give and take. I think a
Right.
final rocket, any of the rockets that we have flying today, it is a set of well thought out compromises, right? And you're building out something where nothing is that perfect, but at the same time, it's no bad decision should be there anywhere. That is extremely hard. I still find it hard, actually, because you're constantly making trade-offs. It's either about mass, or about efficiency, or about cost, and these three are always at three different places. They don't go together at all. And
It's a lot like running a company,
yeah,
right? Although I think the extinction event is highly probable in a
yeah,
rocket versus a company. I guess that's the big difference.
correct. Yeah, at least in the early years, what you're saying is exactly right. Yes, that's correct. So the other one is, it's a lot of boring job, boring stuff to do as well. Like I remember my mom or someone, I think, yeah, my mom asking me. I was on a call, a work call. I was taking it from home. My mom was like, "Why are you talking like a plumber?" Because I was talking about valves, tightening it. Which spanner did you use? Some question like this I was asking, I think. And my mom was like, "Why are you talking like a plumber?" Right? So that shine of it, when you go from, or when you look at a countdown and a lift off, it's a very different thing that people see. But when you go into the gory details of it, I'll tell you a very recent example, right? 3 weeks in our team we spent in cleaning a tank. That's it. It's a tank that flies. Because the benchmark for how much contamination is allowed there was very high. So basically, you need to have only some very very less ppm of this kind of a particle size. After you clean, then you pass air or nitrogen, and then you collect it in a liquid, and you examine the liquid for particles, and that is a very very low number that is allowed. So literally, the entire team in propulsion and structural side was just doing cleaning of tanks for 2 weeks. That if you're not really kind of the vision, that could get really frustrating. Okay, so that was some
So
of the
the
things that
the the, the plumber analogy is probably like accurate now as well because
yeah,
you're
yeah,
cleaning a tank.
yeah, exactly right. I still think so. So that's so again, those things don't usually come out. And also this extraordinary focus on documentation is a little painful. I mean, it's there for a right reason, right? But if you are not able to think about and connect with that, it is really frustrating. It's like, why am I documenting all this stuff? Who cares? Is someone going to even read it? I've heard all versions of it from my team, right?
It's like
So
it's like it's like screenwriting or script writing, Srinath. See, all of it connects. You have to
yeah,
write each line down, or whatever everyone does. It was all planned. This was destiny.
I think so. Yeah,
It's
looking back,
fun.
it somehow seems to connect. Yeah. And
Yeah.
screenwriting, I'll tell you, right? The boring part is actually after you get the first draft, because because at the first draft you already have the story out, right? Then
That's
after
pretty
that, you're trying to compress it, and you're trying to make it look like people can understand the real thing. and you're trying to make it look different, and that is actually a little irritating in screenwriting. Very similar, yeah, you're right. Actually, there are some parallels you could draw, but so those are things that people usually don't think about in rocket science, right? The
Right.
plumbing
No,
aspect,
that's very helpful. I think
the documentation
that
aspect.
that helps. That helps. And um, if you can talk through the journey now from zero to you've already done 0 to 1. What about 1 to 10? How are you making revenue? What's the business model now? And maybe touching upon the fundraising as well in the process.
Yeah. So I think, see, our business model is it's a cargo transportation business. Only thing is the destination happens to be someplace in some orbit in space, right? So we charge our customers for every kg we take to orbit, or we take to space or somewhere, right? So that's basically the pricing model is dollars per kg. That's it. And usually it's not a function of distance, more a function of orbit itself. So that's why the kilometer angle doesn't come. It's more like dollars per kg or rupees per kg. So scaling from 1 to 10 is actually a very different kind of a challenge, mainly because the tolerance for failure is very, very, very low, right? One rocket is okay, but 10 rockets is hard, not because of the production aspect, but because the same standard you have to maintain. Like, in cars, you can do a recall if something goes bad. In your phone, yeah, whatever, a software upgrade could probably help. In rockets, you have this one shot, and the whole thing is actually, again, one more analogy with the movie is when you're actually seeing a rocket launch, right? No, there is no human intervention in the process, right? You're sitting back and watching something happen. It lasts for a few minutes, for which you worked for which hundreds of people have worked for months together.
Amazing.
So that's a very
Amazing.
I always feel like
Perfect
it's like, yeah,
analogy, right?
watching movie, you put
You
it
get a
out there
1 hour
and
movie
everyone is going to buy.
with years of work.
So, sorry, what?
No, I think that's a perfect analogy. You get like a 1 hour movie or like a 1 hour clip or years of
I'll tell
shooting.
you one more parallel, right? It is also something that everyone will judge you on, because it's a little bit like, just like rocket launches are noticed by a lot of people, right? So, and everyone will have
Yeah.
will have a say on it. It's like, I always, after I went to film school, I literally stopped criticizing filmmakers, because I realized that, anyone can go today, some movie comes out, and or say some music comes out. Yeah, what music is this? Is what anyone can judge and say a song is bad, even though that person may not even be able to play one ragam or whatever, right? One chord. But that is basically the
Yeah.
nature of that work. You are putting yourself out there. People will judge you, even though they are no means an expert on that. Rocket science is very similar. I keep telling, my family also, if the next rocket launch blows up, everyone is going to come and say, yeah, actually, Agnikul doesn't make good rockets, right? They are entitled to say that. So that's there. That is there, and because that level of rigor has to be maintained in every product version and in every iteration of the vehicle. We are focusing today a lot more on quality. Like, literally, the quality team is the thing that we are hiring for. We've gotten a lot of retired ISRO people into that team, focusing on that, because repeatability at that level of perfection is something that doesn't easily come. You need to get into mind-boggling levels of checks, because, like, I tell my team also, right? The margins for any performance in a rocket are very, very, very tight. Like, you don't keep any safety factor buffers or anything of that sort. If something has to work, you put, say, a 10% more buffer and you fly it, because if you put a bigger buffer, then you probably won't even be able to go to orbit. Say, for example, a tank has to be, say, 5 mm thick, right? You probably will go to 6 mm. That's it. At 5 mm, the design is just right. 6 is what you allowed. Now, if something happens and some part of the metal is not good, at 6 mm itself, you will fail. So it's like you have to build something that's perfect, but we are all humans. We are all imperfect by nature. We all make mistakes. So you will have to put together a process and a bunch of people who are imperfect, but are able to churn out a perfect product. And that continues to still, baffle me. Like, how are we all able to do it? Forget Agnikul.
Amazing.
I'm talking about SpaceX. I'm talking about ISRO. I'm talking about all these other people, right? How
No,
do a
that's a
group
good
of
point.
imperfect people come together to build a perfect product, right? Like, the gaps you have to fill, your processes have to, account for that, and your thought process and your people have to account for that. So that, I think, is a very challenging, a task. So that is what we are gearing up for today. Fundraising and all that, I mean, yeah, it's always going to be there. And I think as revenues kick in, and by the way, we have not yet made revenues yet, right? We're still a pre-revenue company. With more launches, with actually more proof of actual flights happening, revenues will come. We talk to a lot of customers even today. We have, like LOIs or letters of intent or what MOUs with them. So customers are anyone who wants to put a small satellite in space, right? By small, I mean anything less than 300 kgs in mass. So these are the people who want to fly with us. Use cases are fascinating, by the way. That's its own story, actually. Usually you go to space to take photos of Earth, which is called remote sensing or Earth imaging, or to bounce off signals between 2 points, right? Because you're far enough, you can get that vantage point. And that still is happening, but people have basically built smaller satellites, more in number. They have gone the whole distributed way of building, satellite constellations today. What used to be few in number and far away has now become a lot in number and very close to Earth. So that is the trend in which satellites have gone. Now, this has actually opened up a lot of very interesting reasons why people go to space, right? People are today going to space, say, for example, for, looking at it as a platform. Like, it actually gives you the ability to go there and use what space offers. Space offers vacuum, space offers microgravity, space offers low temperatures. So if you can actually put up something, a manufacturing process that works in space, that is something that, you could actually get benefits out of. So I know companies that are going there to do pharmaceutical drug extraction. People who are going there to store data. People are going there just to throw debris that will burn up on the way down, lighting up the entire sky. It's artificial shooting stars. So imagine a IPL finals or something, you're just going up there for entertainment, right? You go up there and throw a bunch of debris. It'll all burn up well before it reaches down. And in that process, you've lit up the entire night sky. We are only hoping for no cloud cover. But other than that, you pretty much have an entire country covered or an entire subcontinent covered. So that, I think, is where space itself is headed. Space has become more of a platform than a destination.
So what's next for Agnikul? I mean, you guys have worked on some launches. You're getting close to actually finding product market fit in the traditional sense. Of course, is a much longer time scale for companies like yours. What does the next 5-10 years look like for you, Agnikul, and what's the vision now?
Yeah, I think the next few, I think so. We have the first private launch that we're looking at. So it's a new engine, our own launchpad within Sriharikota. It's a very complex combination of new things that are coming live. Hopefully, sometime in June, that will happen. That will be a very interesting launch. And after that, there are a couple of more commercial launches lined up for the later part of this year. So that is the immediate focus, to get that part right. I think also the other part is, we have taken a conscious decision to make a lot of designs in-house. Like, actually, literally every part of the vehicle is designed in-house. The rocket is designed in-house. So we think about Agnikul as more of a library of tools required to crack something or the other in space transportation, right? One arrangement of those tools in a particular way is building small rockets for small satellites, which is what we do today. But that's literally just one product. So I think everything from attempting reusability to drawing a couple of other things about basically trying. We have this tagline called "Launch Anywhere, Anytime, Affordably," and anything that gets us closer to that goal of really being able to go anywhere or any approved launch location and launch within a 2-3 week time frame and make it not a huge roadblock from a cost standpoint. I think that's basically the goal, or I would not even call it vision, probably mission is that, right? Vision was for me, that was been very clear from the very beginning, right? Going to space shouldn't be the hardest part of doing something from space. Today, space tech is hard because getting there is hard. once you get there, actually space is very benign. There is nothing there. You're like basically okay mostly.
Literally.
Electronics, you'll have to
Yeah,
radiation harden it or
it's
something, but that's it.
empty. It's empty.
It's empty. Things don't corrode. Yeah, you'll have to have some radiation protection, but that's about it. If you have an energy, if you're able to get it with solar cells or whatever, which people have figured. You would have heard of the Voyager probes that have now pretty much left the solar system, or
Right.
actually in the outer boundary of solar system, right? So I think it'll just stay like, and if you just get the first part of the journey right, the first 100 kilometers right, after that it is actually a lot of things open up. Problem is getting out of atmosphere,
Earth's
and
orbit.
yeah, getting to Earth's orbit is the hard part. After that, things get a little easier. So I think we'll do everything we can to make sure that aspect of space tech is taken care of to the extent we can. That is really the bigger vision that we have.
Amazing. And just to close out, what's one piece of unfiltered feedback you've received in your journey? That's why we are called Founders Unfiltered. I know you would have some amazing anecdotes, including the sleeping investor, but what feedback really changed the way you looked at things and actually reoriented your thought process?
No, I think the biggest feedback I have received that made me think about, I spoke about that a little already, right? That is to focus on building a company that can build the products as opposed to building the product. I think that for many founders that may apply, but definitely for me more directly, because it was for me about a rocket for a really long time. And then when that question was asked, are you here to build a rocket company or to build a rocket, right? That changed a lot of things, my perspective itself on what I should put my time and effort on. I think that I would say is the single biggest feedback I've got. And I'm trying to change. I don't know if I've gotten there yet, but that is something that keeps running in my mind nowadays.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Srinath, for your time. Really enjoyed the wide-ranging chat in different spaces, pun intended.
Sure.
And we hope our listeners enjoyed this.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Aviral. Thank you, Mazin. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.